There you go.
Oh, it's a hello, everyone. Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I'm Dr. Joanne White, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And a little bit about me before I introduce this wonderfully beautiful person that I've become friends with over the course of the Festival of Storytellers weeks. So, I'm an author, a best-selling, award-winning author, a coach, I have to remember my bio, a coach, a consultant. I've worked a lot with children with special needs. I am a Reiki master teacher. I do energy work. I do hypnotherapy. I do a lot of different stuff. And basically, what is important about me today is that I'm here to introduce Ellie Gaccetta, excuse me. See, I'm getting it right. We've just got to tell you that we've done a lot of last minute changes based on certain things. And so bear with us because we are here to bring you a beautiful show. I want to really give Readers Magnet so much thanks for all that you're doing. You've had to take a look at all of these crazy authors, including me, and be able to help us get through this time together. And so we are very much in appreciation of all that you've been doing. And what's very special about what you guys have been doing is that this is not about publishers. It's really about the storytellers. It's really about the authors, which is not the usual way of being. So we are especially in gratitude for that, because we really have a chance to showcase ourselves and to connect with one another and to learn about. I've learned about so many different authors and their experiences from all over the globe. And we featured about 150 authors. So kudos to you. Thank you for all that you're doing. Please remember, folks, that the Festival of Storytellers goes on through Sunday. Today's only Friday. It's been going on all week since last weekend. And make sure that you check into booths. Please make sure that your sound isn't on. If you want to connect with Ellie and ask beautiful questions of this beautiful soul, please ask them in the chat room and we will be sure to get to them. So let's see. I am going to introduce, it's my pleasure. Ellie was just introducing me this morning, and now I have the pleasure of introducing her. I'm talking about this wonderful human being who lights up my life every time I see her and every time we have a conversation. And she is a Colorado native who grew up in a small farming community outside Denver. Hope you don't mind if I read this, folks.
No, not at all.
Her career in state and local government spanned almost 40 years. Impressive. During which time she earned both a bachelor's and master's degree from Regis University. Ellie retired to provide full-time care to her mother after her mother broke her hip at age 93. Armed with faith, humor, and love, Ellie navigated being a sole caregiver, not an easy job, folks, until her mother's death at age 102. Bless her. Wow. In 2017. One Caregiver's Journey, which is Ellie's first book, is a memoir of her caregiving experience and was published in 2019. And make sure you get it. In 2021, she published Generations of Good Food, which is a collection of 200 recipes which span 6 generations of family cooking. Oh, wow. And I'm getting those books. We already had that conversation. So I will let you know. Today, Ellie lives in a western suburb of Denver and enjoys an active lifestyle that includes baking, cooking, gardening, physical activities, as well as spending time with her family and friends. Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you, Joanne.
You are wonderful. This is great. And this book, I mean, first we're going to talk about your caregiving because, wow, that was a long time to be a caregiver and you didn't have any support. So, firstly, how did you step up to the plate with that? How did you get to decide it's my role?
Well, caregiving can happen in the flash of an eye. as mine did, or it can occur over a period of time with age-related diseases and just getting old. But my mother fell and broke her hip, as you said, at the age of 93 when we were at my brother's house for dinner. And I ceased my nearly 40-year career to become a full-time caregiver about 6 weeks later when she was released from a rehab center. About 18 months after that, she had a stroke. And I began maintaining a journal because we were both going through so many changes and challenges. And I just started writing down how I navigated everything that went along. And as the years passed, because this is over a 9.5-year period, as the years passed, then I got to think, maybe my experience would help somebody else who is in this similar situation. And about 6 months after my mother passed, then I shared my manuscript with some close friends and family and made many, many, many changes. And then I had the book professionally edited. But I think I stepped up to the plate because that's what daughters do.
Not all daughters, believe it or not. I mean, I actually know one person who actually was stealing, and I wasn't a friend of mine, but was actually stealing her mother's Social Security. So, and can you imagine? So you were a daughter that actually recognized that your mother needed help and that you wanted to be there for her. And that's a noble blessing, truly, to do that.
Well, and she lived with me. She had the run of the main floor of my home. She had the master bedroom and the master bath, and she could get around wherever she needed to go with her walker. And then I was upstairs, and then I had 9.5 years of what I refer to as an infant's sleep. I was down here every 2 hours checking on her to make sure she hadn't, because she would fall on occasion and you'd have to deal with that. It's just a thing that I just took on. And I did have, at the early stages of my caregiving, I did have some help. I had a good friend that came in, but as time went on and her issues became more pronounced, and my friend became very ill, I didn't have a lot of help. My brother was always there. He gave me a ton of moral support, but sons can't always deal with their mother's physical issues.
Yeah, and sometimes they feel uncomfortable doing that too.
Oh, yes, he did.
Right. So actually, one of the audiences asked if you had siblings, but you've already answered that question. And what I'm wondering is, what was your brother's relationship like with your mother? Were they close?
Oh, well, my brother would, we have in my book, we have this, my brother called every day. He checked on her. If I needed him at 3 a.m, he was here.
Wow.
But every Sunday, he and his wife would come and they'd have coffee with Nana, or they'd sit at the counter and eat cookies and have coffee with Nana, and he'd sit and visit. And then when my brother would leave, my mom would say, "I love you, Donald." But my mother, and my brother and I are very close, but my mother was a docile, gentle, she was just such a kind little lady. She was compassionate and she had a loving heart. And it's very true and very honest to say that faith and family are her legacy. That was just the core of her being, just her faith and having her family close. But she was by all accounts a true lady. And she was vibrant and active into her 90s. And she drove into her 90s, and it drove my brother crazy that she was out in the car driving around, getting her hair done, going wherever she wanted to go.
You know,
she
that's
cooked and
amazing.
she baked and she crocheted and she gardened and she loved having her family close and her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. And I see that Paige is on, and Paige is one of her great-granddaughters.
And I will check on the chats. Yes, Paige is saying, hello, Auntie, how are you? And that's
Auntie's fine.
so I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, so there you were. Did you when she was driving in her early 90s? Because my mother had a car accident like when she was in her 60s, and that was the end of that. I mean, it's like, okay, that's it. And not me. That was when she decided she's done. All right, but when you were the caregiver, did she continue with the activities, the crocheting and the baking, or where were she during that stage of her
Well,
life?
after she broke her hip, then she couldn't cook anymore. And 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 the fuzz from the yarn started to bother her eyes, so she quit crocheting. In the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, she was unable to navigate the step from my patio door outside onto my patio to sit outside. So every day that the sun came up, I opened the patio door so that she would sit by the screen and she'd listen to the birds and look at the trees and watch the sky. And I live next to a YMCA that has daycare, so all of the kids would play, and sometimes even the kids would see her through the screen door and they'd wave at her. So I mean, she physically she quit doing all of it, but mentally she just was so vibrant.
So we have a comment and a question from the audience. Did your mom realize what you had to give up? Because you're such an inspiration. Did she recognize that you left your job and you just solely went into caregiving?
Yes. And then as her dementia got worse, at times she would say, "But you don't go to work. How do you make any money? How are we living? You don't go to work. You're always here." And so,
Now, my mother had dementia too, and she would call me mommy. Yes, mommy. Yes, mommy.
as time went on, my mother actually would call me Jeanette, and that was her sister.
Oh,
And she as she started to really fail, and I would say from age 98 to 102, I was frequently Jeanette.
and did you correct her?
No.
Okay, important, because I never corrected my mother. I could be mother, I could be whatever you want me to be, and that's important. So before I ask a question, we have another question from the audience. Going through those difficult times, because as you and I both know, caregiving is not easy, and you and I both shared a comment the other day before I finished the question from the audience, and that is, I remember sitting in the back of a movie theater eating popcorn with all the lights out, what I don't even know what the movie was, and the tears are streaming down my face, and you concurred with that
And I told you, your tears weren't streaming, you were sobbing.
Yes, that's true. That's
And
very
I sobbed. I what made
what made you
what
strong?
makes you strong is you don't have time to worry about anything. You got to do what you got to do. Um, you don't have time to stop and think what made you strong. You have your faith. And I had said this to Joanne also. And there's times that even that is fleeting and you're sobbing and you say, where is this God of mercy? But one of the things that I have always said, Joanne, is, the Bible says the good Lord doesn't give you more than you can handle. But I always said he puts you on a bungee cord and he puts you on the cliff and he pushes you over and then he pulls you back. And then a while later, he pushes you over and then he pulls you back. And it's those times that you find your strength. You find your strength with the people that tell you, as my brother did all the time, we'll get through this. And we did.
And you did. And she lived to 102, which is incredible.
Remarkable,
Right.
remarkable.
Really incredible. And so in terms of strength, I want to get back to that a little bit. What did you have to draw on from yourself in terms of being able to be that caregiver pretty much 24/7?
Well, I had worked all those years, all of the bulk of my years in government was in the human services arena. So I had been exposed to the vulnerable, I guess you could say. And I never worked in the trenches. I was never a social worker. I was, in my last years, I was a legislative analyst. I was a policy analyst. I worked with government officials, predominantly with staff. But you learn, you become strong when you see the difficulties that other people are going through.
So did you have to draw on your own resilience? I mean, again, what qualities that you have that any caregiver really needs to be able to draw on? And then I'll respond to it. I'll ask the other question.
Okay. You draw on your compassion, you draw on love, you draw on the fact that you're physically strong.
Right.
Physically strong. Thank the good Lord, I'm as healthy as a little horse, but you're physically strong. You draw on the fact that you've been around enough people who you've listened. I'm a great listener, and you listen to when people say, "This is what you do when this happens, and this is what you do when that happens," and you just, and then it's just instinct. You just learn to do what you need to do.
I think that's so important because we have more within us than we realize, and sometimes a situation like with you and your mom, you have to step up to the plate and you just utilize what you need to. You don't think about it. You just, like you said, Ellie, you just do, and it becomes instinctual and then habitual because you're there to care and you're there to serve for your mom. So that's important. So we have another question from the audience, and then I have another one that's
Okay.
important. How is your work as a daughter caregiver very different from a medical practitioner caregiver? And that's an important question.
The basic piece was I loved my mother. I mean, she was my mother. And the medical pieces of it, my book is not medical advice. My book is, this is what happened to me today, and this is how I dealt with it. She was laying in bed one night, and being Italian Catholic, her room was like the sanctuary filled with saints' statues. And she hollered one night and said, "That statue's going to fall on my head and kill me." And so I moved the statue from one place to the other. And so she saw there was some room between that one and the next one, and she went to sleep. But the next day I put her on her bed. She sat on the bed, and I moved everything around that was in her bedroom so she would feel like she was safe. A medical practitioner isn't going to do that. And I did many of the same things that the medical practitioner did. I gave her two insulin shots a day. I made sure she took all of her medicine. And then as time went on, she would spit it out on the floor, and I wouldn't know if that was the pill that fell out of the dish or if it was the pill that she didn't take. But I gave her shots. I gave her insulin. I gave her medication. If she'd get a cut from aging thin skin, I bandage it and care for it. I mean, in some ways, there's not a heck of a lot of difference, but love.
Well, more than love, and love is key, but also you knew her. You knew a little bit of her idiosyncrasies. You knew, some of her fears, some of her concerns, even though during the time when she had dementia, that changes too. But you loved her and you knew her. And so those two components are, that's a beautiful mix. And sometimes, I mean, medical caregivers, I'm just going to add, are wonderful, but that commitment it's not, when your mother dies, when your mother's sick, whatever, you have a commitment to make sure that you need to do whatever you can to keep her going. And that medical practitioner may not, yes, they want the person to succeed and to live, but it may not be that sense of urgency that Ellie, that you experience. And that's important. That's really important. So caregiving, you were taking care of your mother in 2017, rather. Has caregiving changed that you're aware of, both in terms of professionally as well as what we're doing today individually as family caregivers?
I think caregiving has changed. I think more people are realizing that they have to be caregivers because of the exorbitant cost of senior care facilities and nursing homes and assisted living. Costs a lot of money. The average cost here in Denver right now is between $9,000 and $12,000 a month, and the average family, and most of it, insurance doesn't cover. So people are trying to figure out how to do it, and they're getting it done. There are, and it depends upon the varying degrees of caregiving. What I think has happened over the last year with the pandemic is that people suddenly found themselves in a place where they didn't anticipate being. I will say that in my mind, there are three basic areas. And the first one is that there were the families whose parents were in nursing homes, and they knew that the pandemic was going to result in a lockdown. So they made the conscientious decision to take their parents out of that nursing home and bring them home. Well, that meant learning how to be a caregiver, finding assistance, and figuring it all out when the shutdown shut down essential services as well. Now, if the family happened to be working from home, then the dynamics of working while caregiving had to be navigated. And if the family had children who were in remote learning from home, then the situation could become really stressful and chaotic. And in that situation, I would say patience is key.
I think patience is key through whether it's during a pandemic or whatever. Patience is key with caregiving to begin with. I think that's essential. Now, you wrote this book. What do you want to offer other people? Because a lot of people, like you said, are experiencing being a caregiver, not anticipating having that role, and here we are. What tips, if any, can you just give somebody that's suddenly, okay, this is my new role. What do I do?
You go to the show and cry.
I don't even remember what that movie was about. Those movies.
I
can help you with this.
I don't know what kind of tips I would give, because it all just happens so quickly in my life. You learn. She had a wonderful, wonderful physician who was just so skilled in geriatric care. And he was so kind to her and to me that he offered me a lot of advice, and maybe that helped. But as I explained to you the other day, as time went on, and there's those times when their needs
exceed,
turn your world upside down.
Right.
And you find you're just hanging by that last thread. And then you need to kind of go back in your head. And I was fortunate to have worked with a lot of people who knew about all this stuff. And I contacted a good friend of mine who was a social worker in a hospice. And her comment to me was, you need to start using the physician home service that's in our area. And that was then, after that, then a doctor or a nurse or a physician assistant came to the house every month. And if she got sick, they'd come more often. And my mother never left the house. So I wasn't navigating hallways and doctor's offices and just as sure as the sun comes up. As soon as they call her back into the waiting room, you got to take them to the bathroom. And then you got to deal with that. You got to go in and out of the cars and up and down elevators, not to mention what you have to do to go through to get them out of the house, let alone.
Yeah. And
it's a lot. And then they're sick.
Right. And I actually had to do that. But I want to add to things that are important for people. Firstly, you've got to believe that you could do it. I mean,
Right.
There you are, you're doing it, and you don't have time to doubt yourself. You're doing it, and you have to encourage yourself, and you need people like your brother, because oftentimes we don't have that support. You need people to encourage you and tell you you're doing a good job. And if they are not there, you have to tell yourself you're doing a good job. I often say to people, especially when someone has passed on, and this seems to be a key point, they always think, well, I should have done more. I could have done more. Maybe. And it's so important to recognize and to say to yourself, I did the best that I could. I did what I could do. And you have to be at peace with that.
Well, she lived to be 102, so I did a damn good job.
Yes, you did.
That she lived to be 102. But I will say to you, caregiving isn't for everyone. And I fully understand that. Not everybody's cut out to leave a job or stay home or to be a caregiver. I get it. I get that. For me, was it easy? No. Did I do it? Absolutely. Did I do it to the best of my ability? You bet. And did I have any regrets or remorse? Not a one.
And that's so important, because I took care of my mother differently than you did. We brought her here from New York, and she was able to be in an independent facility for a short period of time. And I remember when she died, I felt that you and I talked about this too, Ellie, that I felt really blessed, even though it was hard and my body hurt and the tears. I mean, I felt blessed that I had the opportunity during the final years of her life to be with her and be that person. And I think that's important. So
wow. Look at that question, and then we're going to switch. Look at
you're not allowed to look at the question. Talk about. We like to have fun, folks, just so you know.
And we've both been moderators and we've both been panelists, so this is cool.
Talk about how you pushed all that experience into writing, into a paper. And somebody asked, same question, what made you decide to write that book? And then we're going to switch to.
Then we're going to switch. No cheating. What I did, I pushed all that information over 9.5 years. I mean, I pushed all of that experience. I would run up to my office when my mother would nap. I have a loft that I have an office in, and I could look over the railing in the loft, and I could see her sleeping on the couch, because we called it her perch. And not this couch, but she would sleep on the old brown couch that we called it. And I would go upstairs and just write what was in my head, that all the stress that was on and what I had done that day and what I had had. And then at some point along the way, you just kind of think, I could make this into a book, and not necessarily make it a book, but help somebody. And I had called my brother one morning. About 5:30, 6 o'clock. I had bought some new guards for her walker, and I couldn't get them on, and I was panicked that if she got up and had to go to the bathroom, she was going to be lopsided and she would fall, and I couldn't keep her straight. And he came and he put them on for me the right way. And while he was here, she woke up and we got her up and put her robe on, and she sat by the breakfast bar and had coffee with him. And then when he went home, he just shook his head and said, "You know, sis, you need to write a book." And I said, "You know what? I'm thinking about it."
You know, I think so what's so important is also being able to write down your thoughts, because I did that with journaling with More Heaven, because every child is special. And that's how that book sort of came about too. But I think what's also special is that you had somebody there. My sister was in Ohio and I was the sole person, and I
Oh
always
boy.
but she didn't live with me initially. And I questioned that. I questioned, like, am I doing the right thing? Because and you probably had that too, those questions too. But again, like we've been emphasizing, you don't have time to dwell on it because you just have to do and you have to perform. I remember actually firing a doctor. I had brought my mother into a doctor's office and he was making all these jokes that were above her head, and he thought he was the funniest guy. And I thought, you're being rude. She's not getting it, and that's not fair. And who are you performing for? So I never took her back to that doctor again. And I
I
think
did that with an eye doctor. He put his back to her and he talked to me, and she was livid, and they kept putting drops in her eyes, and she was sicker than a dog. And when we came out of the office, which was packed to the rafters with people waiting to see this doctor, the nurse said to me, "You need to make another appointment." And my comment was, "I don't think my mother will ever come back here with the way she was just treated." And there's a part of you there's a part of you that says, "Oops, you shouldn't talk like that." But you
no,
know what? Doctors aren't God, folks. Doctors are just like you and I. They put their pants on one leg at a time, like you and I. And a decent bedside manner means you treat, I don't care how old or how young you are, you treat that person with dignity. And they didn't treat my mother with dignity, and I was just as angry as she was.
right. And I was indignant too.
I would imagine you
Right.
were.
Well, again, just what you said. And I think it's important that doctors have that, like you said, some really good bedside manner. Now, my mother used to say, any doctor was, "Yes, doctor." Yeah. Now that's not who she was. I mean, before her dementia, it was like, who my friends couldn't catch up to her in terms of the way she walked and how powerful she was. But she became very, like your mom, very docile. I just want to add one thing before we switch to I am hungry food. And that is not everybody who goes through Alzheimer's or dementia is docile.
Mm.
There are many stories who people getting angry, people getting lost. I remember my mother actually, she was on a field trip with her group, and suddenly I had to go find her in in a mall because she just wandered off and they couldn't find her. And I left my work. I went to this mall looking for mom, where are you? But because we're the ones that, again, we have to clean up the mess, kind of, right? So it's important. All right. My favorite topic today, because I am hungry, given what we've been doing all day, is food. So, Ellie, how did you switch from writing this book on caregiving to food and writing this book on food? And then we're going to dive right in. I wish you had some plates to show us next time.
Well, you have to just look at the video in my booth to see all the food that I
I
made for
haven't
my
had a
video.
moment, but I will.
You need to go there and
I will.
go there and see all that food that I made in my video in
Oh,
my booth. My booth is one caregiver's journey, by the way. Well, after my mom passed, and I had to try to figure out how to reintegrate back into a world that had left me at 9.5, 10 years. I began cleaning everything out. I remodeled my home. And one winter day, which proves how much I know about this, but one winter day, I was cleaning out the pantry that I decided needed to be painted. And I came across all of her cookbooks, all of the recipes. And that was a generation that they used to clip recipes out of newspapers and magazines, and they'd tear them out of the doctor's office. They'd read a magazine in the doctor's office and you'd hear rip, and they'd fold it up nice and put it in their purse. But I just decided to haul all of her stuff to my dining room table, and I started looking. She had recipes from her aunts, and I knew that. She had recipes from her aunts. And I hand wrote.
Wow.
I hand wrote all these recipes out, and I brought them to my local office supply store, and I had 20 copies made. I put them in a binder, and I gave them to her granddaughters and her great-granddaughters and a few of her very special young nieces. And then last year, and that happened at the end of, that happened, say, maybe like 2018. And I hadn't done anything with One Caregiver's Journey. I mean, I was still kind of in a fog. And last year, a friend of mine asked, well, why don't you share all those recipes you gave to the girls? Because then my friends and my brother's friends and people would say, well, can I have a copy of that? And I'd always say, I'm not going to have any more copies made. And I just decided to undertake, because it was the pandemic, you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't do anything. So I undertook the monumental task of taking all those handwritten recipes and putting them on my computer to generate a manuscript. And then I had been talking with ReadersMagnet about this. But I have to tell you that while I was typing out my recipes, one of the very first recipes that I had, when I was in the instructions, typing out the instructions, it said something like, will you saute the garlic? And well, there's no garlic in the recipes. There's no garlic in the ingredients. And then I essentially made every one of those recipes in my head as I typed it, so that I would make sure that they were as right as I could remember her making them and me making them. And was it a lot of brain damage? You have no idea how much brain damage it was, but
So
I had a lot of time on my hands. So, like my first book, then I did have it professionally edited, and here we are.
So
Again.
did you try those recipes out to make sure that they were accurate in some way, shape, or form before you actually, have you utilized those recipes?
Every recipe in that book I have made.
Okay, the other question that I'm wondering, because again, I have to get this book. Do you have, like, this is from Aunt Margaret or Aunt what? So that, is there anything in there from the people that the recipe came from? Or is that a secret?
No. And ReadersMagnet then asked me if I would be willing to tie somehow my cookbook back to my caregiving book. And I did that with stories on many of the recipes that I remember. They were family favorites. And
so let me hear one story. No, you're not allowed to read it. Oh, you can read it. So, but before you read, so this is a story from the caregiver. Just give us a little bit of what this is. This is a story that's.
No, it's a story that it's like, okay, and I just opened it to this, and okay. So this is like the super pie crust, and this was a general, easy go-to crust for my mother. She would sometimes just make the pie crust and roll it out and cut it into silly shapes and put them on a cookie tin and sprinkle them with cinnamon sugar and bake them. And then that was the after school treat when all the grand and great grandkids came.
And she must have had a great time making them into little funny shapes, and right?
She used to, you can take pizza dough and fry it. And she would always take, it's kind of like an Italian sopapilla.
What's that
And
mean?
so if the girls would call and say, the girls being my nieces, would call and say, Nana, we're going to bring the little kids to see you. And two of my nieces had 3 children each, and it was like the traveling circus. They'd bring all 6 of the kids with their strollers and hooves and diapers. And my mother, if she knew they were coming, she would make this enormous tray of pizza frite, is what it's called, fried pizza. And then here again, they would put sugar and cinnamon on it, and on pizza dough.
Okay.
On the dough. And so they would put cinnamon and sugar on it. And of course, if my brother knew, he'd go have coffee, and then he'd get to see all of his grandkids and our late oldest brother's grandkids. And normally if I got home from work later that day, there might be one left that I could have. And she would even routinely, she would peel and cut 8 or 9 potatoes, and she'd make French fried potatoes for the kids after school.
Oh, I love
and they'd all come.
She sounds wonderful.
She was a grandma.
She was a grandma, and she was a caregiver in her own right.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Oh yeah.
Right. So there's a question that's important, and that is, because people need to buy this book. Remember, you say it's for novices as well.
It's the cutest little $10 cookbook you'll ever buy.
It's beautiful. But is it it's not only for novices, but it's for seasoned people. How did you accomplish that?
Yes. Like one of the favorite cakes that she always made was the chiffon cake. And a chiffon cake honestly takes a considerable amount of skill. And very few, she and one aunt made the chiffon cake. And I have 2 cousins that know how to, that make it. In fact, right now, I'm probably the only one. They are both in ill health, and I'm the only one that made it. I made it for my video. It's just a lot of technique and a lot of tricks. On the other hand, the recipe we call Aunt Mella's banana bread is a piece of cake. Aunt Mella was her youngest sister, by the way.
Okay, thank you. The last time I made cakes was when I was in college.
Do you make cake?
I love to cook, but I don't make desserts. So, so when I get your book, I'm gonna have a blast. I may gain some weight, but after running around with ReadersMagnet and the Festival of Storytellers, that's okay.
I concur wholeheartedly.
So give us another little story that's in the book.
Well, I can tell you from the foreword. Okay, so let me find the foreword here. Hold on. In the foreword, I talk about there was a time when cooking and baking was really necessary skills for survival. Today, you have fast food, you have the deli at the local grocery store that's always loaded with ready-made food you can buy. But my mother was the eldest of 6 children, so she did not work on the family farm. She stayed behind with her grandmother to help clean the house, and by extension, she learned how to cook and bake. They cooked 3 meals a day for the family and all the workers. They used to feed all of their workers as well as the family. They didn't break out the breakfast bars or make smoothies or toss a box of cereal and a bottle of milk on the table. I can remember growing up on the farm that they would go out and work at 4:30 in the morning. And when it was 8 o'clock, my grandmother had a big pan of fried potatoes and fried eggs and toast ready for them to come in and eat by about 7:30, 8 o'clock.
So are you still cooking that way? Because I'm coming for breakfast.
Actually, actually, I'm a one-dish cook when my brother comes for dinner because his favorite food is fried potatoes. But so let me tell you about when my mother got married in 1937. And in those days, they lived together in a communal area. So she moved in with my father's family. And I had an aunt that used to always say it was a great day for the Irish when my mother moved in. Because my grandfather quickly realized that my mother knew how to bake. And she would make a 5-gallon bucket of Spritz cookies every week. Now, and those were the days those were the days when they had that press that you screwed and up, and 5 gallons of cookies.
What's a Spritz cookie?
A Spritz cookie is a little butter cookie.
Oh, okay.
It's a little butter cookie. And then she and my grandmother also baked 16 loaves of bread every week in an outdoor oven to feed all of the family. And as we have always said in our family, there isn't a single vegetable that can't be sauteed with garlic and oil or cooked with pasta.
Well, and I'm not Italian, and I attest to that. I love, and garlic not only tastes delicious, but it's
good for you.
Right, it's very healing and very important. So I have a question, and you and I talked about this before. I'm gluten-free. Stop looking at my job.
Yes.
So I'm gluten-free. And how do some of those recipes that's in this book, because I want it, transfer over so that I can use the recipes and still keep to my diet that I have to for my health?
All of the candy, the book has main meals and main dishes and some odds and ends, breads, cookies, cakes, and candy. The candy is all gluten-free. Not that that's helpful to you. It's a diet buster, but the candy is all gluten-free. Most of the recipes in my book can be substituted just about one-on-one with a good blended gluten-free flour.
Now, do you say that in the book at all, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, because because I have a nephew. I have a niece whose husband is gluten-free, and their daughter outgrew her need for gluten-free. But my family's so big. We have who can't eat nuts and who can't. Everybody can't eat something, so you learn to cook. But with the gluten-free, the hack I shared on my live stream the other night is I take if we're gonna have meatballs and we're gonna or something that's going to need breadcrumbs.
Right.
I just put a loaf of gluten-free bread in the food processor. I add some salt and pepper, some basil, some parsley. We don't eat oregano. If you like that taste, you can add that. And I let it dry, or I put it in the oven to dry if I'm in a hurry. And that's the bread I use in my meatballs. That's the mixture that I use if we're having baked shrimp, which is in my book, that you use is breading. The Sicilian tradition is you don't use cheese on seafood pasta, you use breadcrumbs. And so that's what I would use. So you're having a Super Bowl party, or we call them Bronco Sundays, even though the Broncos haven't been real good the last few years. But you're having a Super Bowl party, or you're having a backyard, and you're going to have meatballs and sausage. Everybody eats out of the same pan. And nobody knows any difference because nobody knows the meatballs have gluten-free breadcrumbs in them. And everybody eats out of the same pan, and you have your gluten-free rolls and you have your regular bread. And a salad with some fruit and a la Shea, you're ready to go.
I love it. I'm coming for dinner.
I'm having you.
So to do a little bit about cooking, okay? So how does one get to a place where, let's say I'm a new cook, and I'm not, but in terms of some of the cakes, like I said, I'm ancient, so it's been a long, long time. How do I get a sense of confidence about using the recipes?
You know, even a seasoned cook, we have a saying in my family that every every holiday season you screw up something and you end up throwing everything away. It all just goes to the trash. You just get it just doesn't come out. And that happened to me actually while I was making the food for my video for Generations of Good Food. Just threw it all away. And you begin to develop a confidence with the fact that, you know what, you can do it, and you can't be in a rush. And if you're gonna try to bake or cook and be in a rush, and I'm the queen of 30-minute meals, but if you're gonna be in a rush for baking, don't do it, because it takes time. If you want it to come out right, you want it to come out the way it should be, you want it to taste right, you need quality ingredients. You can't use imitation anything. And it just takes time. And in time you'll go, you know what? I'm a pretty darn good cook. Yes, ma'am.
So what's wonderful is that when you look at this book, it also has history in it, excuse me, in terms of the way that your family cooked. And that's a beautiful blessing, because in a way you're really preserving that for not only for your family, but for all of us. And that's important. And I have something to add about cooking, because during this pandemic, I mean, I love to cook, but I found, and I'm still finding, that cooking relaxes me.
Mhm.
And it feels very creative. I don't necessarily follow a recipe. I might look at something and then, okay, what's in the refrigerator and what can right? But it can be enjoyable when you're doing it by yourself, or when you're doing it sharing it with family members, and it takes your mind off of the stress. And that's been a godsend for me over
And
this.
I have said cooking is my happy place. Cooking was my happy place when I was taking care of my mother, and cooking is still, my kitchen is my happy place. My kitchen is my happy place. It's just it's and to add to what you were just saying, when you cook, cooking is the art. And in cooking, you can make whatever changes your little heart desires. Baking is the science, and baking, that recipe should be followed to a T. If it calls for a cup of flour, don't say, nah, I don't want all that, because it's going to take a cup of flour and it's not going to come out.
And maybe that's why I haven't been a baker. But we have another question from Shannon. That's, do you think you'll ever write and publish another book?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
yeah, you got to write one with me. Don't say that. You're ready. We're going to write about how we got through this week. No.
2 weeks. How did we get, that might be what we could write about is the personalities that we have met throughout the festival of Storytellers. This has been just a remarkable event, and let's shift gears here and thank you.
Right. And also how humor is important to get through whatever kind of adversity or challenge, whether it's here with these last 2 weeks, or just in life, caregiving, even cooking. You have to be able to say, oh no, what did I do? And be able to okay, next, please.
My mother used to love, she was a remarkable baker, but when she got old, she would say, let me sit by the counter and I'll help you roll these cookies. And they would be in the most god awful shapes, and they would just look, but she was so proud of what she was putting on that tray to be baked that you just go, whatever. And you know what? They all went down the same place, and it didn't matter that they didn't look like what they should look like.
And you know what? Food is also cooking, and eating. It brings people together. It helps create more conversation, more good time. So it's very important. So we've talked about you, Ellie, as a caregiver, and the devotion and attention that you had to give to your mom, despite the tears, despite the drenched popcorn. And also this beautiful book that again is kind of a tribute to your mom, because you kind of rediscovered her recipes that she was keeping, and the secret, I still have recipes like that from many years ago that every once in a while I'll pull out from some magazine I got or whatever. And I think again that something that's so very, very important that you're passing on to our listeners and our people who are watching this event is that do it.
Yeah.
Whether it's cooking, whether it's caregiving, you need to step up to the plate, Ellie, like you did, because you love your mom. You needed, there was something that happened. You had to be there for her, and you show up. And that's an important lesson for all of us, whether you're cooking and your family's coming over and it's like, they're all going to be converging here in 3 hours or 3 days or whatever. What do I need to do? And you show up, you create what you need to. And I want to encourage our people who are here. Thank you so much for being here. Buy Ellie, show your book again, because I love the cover. Buy Ellie's book, Generations of Good Food, and also her caregiver book. And remember, look at them, the One Caregiver's Journey. Remember that you need to acknowledge who you are and take care of yourself throughout, whether it's cooking or caregiving or the pandemic or whatever it is. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. They always say that when you're on an airplane, before you actually put the mask or whatever, the oxygen on somebody else, you have to make sure that you do it for yourself, because if you're not capable, you're not going to be able to help somebody else. And that's key for what you had to do, Ellie. So I want to thank ReadersMagnet and Festival of Storytellers. I'm actually doing a booth again, 5 o'clock, fingers crossed. Hopefully it works this time, who knows? But it's so important to, again, pay attention to everybody's booths. We've had over 150 authors, and this festival, again, is about authors. So kudos to ReadersMagnet, to all of the efforts behind the scenes and in the scene and around the scene and whatever. Thank you so much. And Ellie, you are a blessing.
Thank you. You know what? I would like to say as well that this is the Festival of Storytellers has been just a remarkable, remarkable event. And I would like to give credit to, I've been honored to be the lead moderator for the festival. And I'm moderating a session right after this, but that staff and the management have gone through extraordinary lengths to make sure that all of the authors were prepared, all of the booths were put together. We have all of the information we need to do our sessions, and it's not just been 2 or 3 people. It's been the entire organization who has worked together to put this on.
So let's clap for them.
Let's give them a hand.
Right.
Yes,
a hand. And when I've called help,
and they're there,
and they're
there.
Help! I don't know what I'm doing. Help!
They're there. And even when it's operator error, as my last couple screams for help have been, they don't make you feel silly because you don't know what you're doing.
Right. And hopefully we'll know what we're doing for the rest of it.
Hopefully.
You and I are on it.
Joanne, thank you so much.
Ellie, you are a blessing. Thank
You
you.
well.
And we are going to have more fun over the
I
weekend.
hope so.
Thank
I
you
hope so.
all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.